Good morning. It's February 3rd, 2022, day after Groundhog Day. Still cold out. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standards live show. It comes to you every day at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Monday to Friday, except holidays, unless something's breaking, and then we'll still carry on with the show. It's that important to us. Comments are welcome. Again, one of the great things about being live, we got a comment stream. We got people listening on YouTube and Rumble and Facebook. Get in there, get in on the discussion. I won't necessarily read out every comment or question, but I might get them to our guests and, have some discussions with each other. That's part of the fun of interacting on something live. Try to keep it civil, though. We've had some trolling and things going on. Just ignore the trolls if they're commenting and pick out the civilized people, and we can have some good discourse here. I got a great lineup again today. My first guest is going to be Travis Smith. He's an associate professor of political science at Concordia University. He spent a night visiting a truck stop when people were staging and getting ready to go to the convoy in Ottawa, and he interacted with the people there and had some thoughts he put into a column that he shared with the Western Standard. And it's just good to get some dialogue with people who actually been there. We're getting so much bad news these days. Let's talk to people who were there on the ground and find out what's been happening. Along that same line, those who are familiar with the show have seen that James Finkbeiner has been down at the protests in the Coutts, Alberta area by the American border for quite some time now. He's been reporting to us live and giving us updates from there, and it's still ongoing. It sounds like they're making some progress and agreements and some traffic is moving, but there's still some hang-ups and tensions and different blockades starting up in different spots. So we'll check in with James and from that location and see how things are going and what's happening. Then Kerry Diotte's going to join me. He was a Canadian Conservative activist. He was a member of Parliament for the electoral district of Edmonton-Griesba. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, from 2015 to 2021. And we're going to talk about, this new Conservative leadership race that has suddenly come up. Nancy saying we can't access your online site. Is it offline or censored? I should say. We are having some technical difficulties there. It's not censorship, but it's very frustrating. And I assure you that people are running as hard as they can to get that darn thing up and running again. And as soon as it is, Dave's going to let me know, and we will get you back there. For the time being, we can talk about news here. So, we'll get that from James. So before I get into what's got me triggered today, I do want to talk about our sponsor, one of the good news things. And these guys help pay our bills, and that's Bitcoin Well. They've been a sponsor for us for some time now. If you go to bitcoinwell.com, you'll find these guys. What they are is a service that'll help you enter safely the world of digital currencies and get involved. And they lead you through there. It's the main thing's being safe. You worry about your money. Well, these guys never hang on to your money. They're non-custodial. That means the money gets sent directly to your own wallet. You control it. And they will walk you through how to get set up. How do you do this? What's the background of Bitcoin? I mean, it's a complicated new world, all these crypto digital currencies. Well, these guys will educate you, help you get involved in it and feel safe about it. And they got so many practical ways to do it. They got ATMs throughout Western Canada. They got a map of it on their website where you can deposit to your Bitcoin wallet, or you can set up and forget it plans. We're just every couple of weeks or once a month, a certain amount of money will go into your Bitcoin wallet. So check them out. I'll talk a little more about them later. Bitcoinwell.com. It's the great entry point for you to get into the world of digital currencies. Okay. Well, what's got me going on today? What's got me triggered? I'm tired of race baiting. Racism in developed nations is at its lowest point in modern history. You wouldn't know it, though, and if you're listening to the progressive woke set. If you believed everything from the hysteric left lately, you'd think we're living in a world of lynching and our political systems are dominated by a racial caste hierarchy. As politically motivated progressive politicians, activists, and media members continue to perpetuate the myth of widespread, unchecked racism, they're actually creating racial divides among citizens where there hadn't been any before. I'm not denying that work still needs to be done. Racism still exists. I mean, there are still odious individuals out there who feel their race is superior to others, and they even form small groups and they go out and try and promote their sick ideology. These people, though, are truly a minority of a minority, and they're chased away from pretty much any organization or gathering once their leanings are identified. I remember quite well in the early 90s, skinheads still openly walked the streets in modern nations. We used to see them in Calgary downtown all the time. They still represented a tiny minority even then, but they felt comfortable enough in their racism that they marched around and openly displayed it. When's the last time you've seen one of them? Klan members, perhaps? Any signs of organized racism? Again, it's out there, but you don't see it. It's so tiny. It's gone. Organized racism has been driven into the sewers where it belongs. Your average person's immediately repulsed by acts of racism, and they condemn it when they see it. Racism is now being used as a political tool by the left and has to stop. The statements from some media outlets all the way up to the Prime Minister with regards to the Truckers for Freedom convoy have been divisive and frankly disgusting. You don't have to agree with the goals of the convoy or the protests itself at all in order to see that it has absolutely nothing to do with racism. You can call out the anti-vaccination messaging, the blockage of streets, or even the use of horns as a tool for protest. But it's ludicrous to call this a racist movement. When people like the Prime Minister call everything they oppose racist, nothing is racist. Those few real acts of racism that happen out there are overwhelmed by reports of fake racism, such as those on the Truckers for Freedom convoy. I watched a horrific interview on CTV of a black woman in Ottawa who's claiming she'd been locked in her home for days, even before the protest got there. And she felt would remain hidden throughout these protests as she felt racists in the convoy would hurt her if she went out. Now, whether this woman was truly agoraphobic and believed that racists were waiting outside her doors, or if she was just trying to feed that false narrative of widespread racism in the protests, it was a ridiculous interview. It fed fear and division, and it was an outright irresponsible piece. Those sorts of interviews are all too common in a world with a legacy media fixated on racism. People of all races are participating in the convoy. The long-haul trucking industry is a massive component of South Asian drivers. How insulting must it be for those guys who are at the protests, Sikhs and such, to be called white nationalists by national leaders in the media? I mean, God, talk about being targeted. Any efforts to counter the false claims that the protests in Ottawa are race-based are quickly attacked by the establishment. They jealously want to guard and foster their division. I watched a live video of a peace pipe ceremony being held within the Ottawa protests by a number of Indigenous people. I was impressed. And I tweeted a picture here. There it is right there about this gathering of people. They're banging on drums, smoking a peace pipe. I think they were getting ready to set up a teepee out there. Thousands of people shared and liked the peaceful show of solidarity and diversity when I tweeted it. Others, though, were enraged that I dared to tweet it. Liberal Laurie Mark Burry tweeted "liar" at me in a quick response. He later implied that the photo was from another period. He went silent when I finally posted a link to the live video. Guys, it wasn't faked. It wasn't made up. It was from something that happened on the Hill. Why has this got you so outraged? And Senator Patrick Brazeau, for those who don't remember him, Justin Trudeau beat the piss out of him in a boxing match, actually, that was held by Sun News Network some years ago. But he jumps in and offers a correction with some sort of statement from local Indigenous organizations that condemn the protests. Now, Brazeau and the First Nations groups that he shared the statement from don't represent the views of every Indigenous citizen any more than I do. Native individuals hold diverse views and express them just like everybody else. And implying that they hold some sort of hive mind, as Brazeau did, is actually a form of racism in itself. My tweet was then swarmed by the typical liberal fart catchers. To no effect, I don't care. I mean, they attacked those things. But what was striking was how virulently and quickly they came out just because I put something out they didn't like. The narrative of the protests being racist is fake, and it's easily disproven. The people perpetuating this myth know it's fake. And that's why they respond so hysterically when evidence to the contrary of their agenda is presented. The racial division and distrust being sowed by race baiters during this truckers' convoy protest is unforgivable. People are being driven apart while racial lines are being drawn. This is what fosters real racism, and it's coming from the establishment left. We could actually be setting ourselves backwards when we've been doing so well. The world needs to heal when this pandemic ends, economically and socially. We should be looking for ways to constructively unite people rather than hatefully divide them. A good first step towards finding that unity, though, is to end the race baiting now. It starts with the Prime Minister, it goes on to the legacy media, and on with the rest of the activists. Call it out when you see it, guys. Don't let them get away with it. That's what's got me triggered today. Now, let's get on to some other news. There's, of course, all sorts of things to get me triggered there. We'll bring in our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what we've got going on in the newsroom at the Western Standard office today. How's it going, Dave?
It's going well, Cory. How are you?
Well, good. I'm annoyed, but that's standard.
Yeah, you know what? And I've got an idea for you. And apparently, if you are a federal government worker, you have access to seminars to help you breathe better. Believe it or not, we've got a story on the site whenever it comes back up that Ottawa has spent $153,000 hiring people to give seminars to their stressed out workers on how to relax and how to breathe properly.
Boy, my
Maybe
show would
sign
get
up
pretty
for it.
boring if I relaxed, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, it's again just another sign of nobody cares about taxpayers' money in Ottawa, and they'll throw it at ridiculous things. Another thing, obviously, we're keeping tabs on this morning is the trucker situation in Alberta. A deal was reached yesterday afternoon to keep or to open up the Coutts border crossing. They've got one lane going in each way, and commercial traffic is now moving between Canada and the United States. But they may not get very far, because just up the road in Milk River there is another blockade that started. These are truckers that tried to get down to Coutts in order to support their colleagues there, but they came across an RCMP roadblock, and the RCMP were not going to let them in. So negotiations failed late last night, early this morning, and our James Finkbeiner says about 150 trucks have now blockaded that highway near Milk River. So it seems to be one step forward, one step back in trying to get this thing solved. The GoFundMe, Cory, you'll remember, passed $10 million yesterday. Well, it's finally been shut down. You remember when the Convoy first started, there were those nasty false reports by the mainstream media that it had been closed, which were untrue. But now it has been. The GoFundMe wants to just make sure that everything's done right, and all their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed. So they're working with organizers on that now. I know $1 million of it had already been released, and this is to help pay for food and lodging and gasoline and everything the truckers need. Truckers are against vaccine mandates, obviously, and we've got an interesting story on UCP talking points. The Western Standard has a source that has provided us with what UCP MLAs are being told to tell their angry constituents. And basically what it is it's just a plea for time, stalling for time, and basically saying we're working to get the pandemic restrictions released. So still no time frame in Alberta. The Premier seems to be shortening it. He initially said March and then the end of February, and now there's even talk of it coming out sooner than that. So that's what we've got on the site that nobody can see at the moment. But Cory, I've got to tell you about this breaking story in Bowden that Mel Risden, our top reporter, is working on. A whole bunch of kids, a dozen of them or so, decided they weren't going to wear masks today. So the teachers locked them in a boot closet, believe it or not. And they are having to spend the day locked in this boot closet. And Mel, with brilliant reporting, has been able to talk to one of the 30 apparently kids that have been locked in the boot camp, or in the boot room. So that's going to be an explosive story that Mel is putting together right now, and we'll be keeping an eye on that situation, because 30 kids locked in a room, somebody's got to put a stop to that, and I know lawyers are already involved. So that's what's on the go at the moment, Cory.
Well, another day full of all kinds of news to look forward to. Hopefully that site's up soon, and there'll be a lot of great reading just waiting for you guys there as soon as it gets rolling. And yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, we've been hearing things. The teachers have been at least we can't say with all of them, but the unions and some of the worst in this. I mean, we've seen video of kids with the masks being taped to their faces and things like that. I mean, now locking them in boot rooms over wearing masks over a virus that doesn't hurt kids, and it doesn't seem to be, at least very rarely hurts kids. I shouldn't, overstate, but we're just, this panic is maintained. Even it seems the lighter this pandemic gets, the stronger some of the restrictions and insanity gets.
I'll tell you, Cory, if I was a parent of one of those 30 kids locked in that room, I'd be making my way to the school right now, ready to kick down some doors.
And I suspect that more than a few are right now. Well, we'll be watching to keep up to date with that. And everybody, yes, as soon as that stubborn site is up and running, I will let you all know. So thanks for checking in, Dave, and we will talk to you later.
We will indeed, Cory. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been just a busy, crazy time. I'm not a web expert, but I mean, our site's been getting record traffic. It's just been beating the heck out of it. I don't know if that has anything to do with why it's having the difficulties it is today, but we are getting that rectified because, of course, we got to get that news out here. And getting back to that, a story that hasn't been getting nearly enough press lately, and it's getting out there. It's getting out to a degree with the mainstream, but this should be explosive, and we're not hearing a lot. And that's that Johns Hopkins University study, using metadata from, I believe it was 23 other studies, checking out the cost benefits of lockdowns and restrictions. We've got the evidence. We've got 2 years worth. And again, this isn't some small little group or institute or anything. It's Johns Hopkins University. These guys specialize in research. That's what they do. It's as credible as it gets. And they determined that all the lockdowns and restrictions have led to a 0.2% reduction in mortality with the pandemic. What a waste of time. And plus, they could list all sorts, of course, the damages that these restrictions and lockdowns have done. I mean, it's been massive. Why are we not raising this study on the flagpole and saying, holy cow? I mean, again, let's not fault the people who didn't know any better and locked us down before, but obviously it didn't work. Let's stop. Let's back off. The people are entrenched. They won't back off. They found their position. They won't let go. And that's what's happening with protests. That's what I was talking about with those crazed people pushing on the racism narrative. We need compromise. We need level heads. The numbers are coming in, guys. The science is speaking. Let's change the policy to reflect it. And as Dave was saying, it sounds like the provincial government, even though they're perhaps speeding their reopening faster than they anticipated due to outside pressures, they're moving towards that. With reasonable pressure put on government, we can move them. We can do that. The Convoy, we'll be checking in with James in a little while. It sounds like they're letting some people through now, but it's been on and off. They're negotiating, but at least negotiations open, and that's important. And the government looks like it might be moving on some things, and that's important. I mean, just on a micro level, I mean, in here, you might notice, you see, Derek insists that I wear a necktie when I do these shows. I can't stand wearing neckties. Drives me bananas. But, hey, he calls the shots around here. So I've been tying terrible knots now for weeks and weeks, and it drives Derek bananas. He actually comes in and manually fixes my tie at times just before shows. But fine. You know what? Derek dug his heels in. We got to a point of compromise. As you can see, I've got a nice Windsor knot. I've always known how to tie them. I just felt if I ruined them long enough, Derek would back off. Instead, though, I've compromised. We've gone. I'm wearing the correct apparel, and the tie is on. We found a compromise, though, because, however, I still refuse to wear underwear, and I will not move on that point. But Derek's happy. I'm happy. We've got a better-looking tie. We can have compromise and agreements happening all over the place. If Derek and I can come to a middle ground there, the government and the protesters can. Okay, I'm going to speak quickly to one of our sponsors here, about one of our sponsors, before I bring our first guest of the day on. Well, second, I guess, after Dave. And that is the Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys are great. If you collect firearms, or if you want to get into firearms, responsible, of course, recreational use, these guys got all the resources there for you. Their website is CSSA-CILA.org, and it's the Canada Shooting Sports Association. That might be an easier way to find them. And they've got everything from listings of where there's going to be gatherings and trade shows to find firearms, things on sports shooting, things on target shooting, things for hunting. And most importantly, at least in my view, they are lobbying on your behalf to continue to maintain and enjoy firearms. And they have legal challenges put out towards the federal government on behalf of firearm owners. And again, coming back to putting pressure on government will back off if we put pressure on them. So if you are concerned, and you should be, about maintaining your right to use responsibly, of course, and safely firearms and own them as property as they are, you need to stand up for it. And these guys are where you're going to do it. So go to the Canada Shooting Sports Association, check them out, take out a membership with them help you. Because hey, if we don't stand up for ourselves, they will take our rights away. They're a great sponsor. Okay, so I am about to bring in Travis. And Travis Smith wrote a piece for us. He went out to check out the convoy. He went to a truck stop, actually, met with a number of people. And I don't believe, if I recall from the column, he found a bunch of fire-breathing extremists or crazy people or people bent on destruction of the nation. But we'll talk to him and confirm that in a moment. So, hey there, Travis. How you doing?
Good to see you, Cory. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on the
Excellent.
show.
Yeah, no,
You
thanks
made
for
me very
coming in.
self-conscious. I didn't get the memo about the dress code.
Oh, yes. So I see guests are exempt from it, which again is part of what, troubles me because I'm overcome with envy at that comfortable, unrestrained neck of a guest out there, whilst I'm still bound up like this. But I will get over it. And as I said, I'm quite unrestricted and free in other areas that the audience need never see or really think about any longer. So when you got to the, you went, let's just kind of lay out, you decided to go out and see firsthand and check out who the people were and met with a bunch when they were en route to Ottawa at a truck stop, right?
On the way to Ottawa in Vankleek Hill, about an hour's drive, just over the border with Quebec. And I had been talking to some locals who were planning on volunteering to donate some food. And I sort of got wind of it, and I thought I was going to go and check it out. So arrived, before sundown, and trucks were starting to roll in, all kinds of vehicles, big and small, and they kept their bright lights on and honked their horns. And what developed over the course of several hours, despite the fact that it was minus 20 degrees outside, was a really sort of friendly environment in which people who'd never met each other were smiling and nodding at each other, lots of, hope and optimism in the air, as it were. Volunteers had set up in a barn with a giant spread of food and provisions for the truckers. And what was just really fantastic, more than anything else for me, Cory, was just to see that, that locals all on their own, acting voluntarily, could put something together in which they could try to help some people out, make sure that they had a safe place to stay the night. Some people were offering to make sure that, they could, get a hot shower in the morning and that they would have some food. And it was just a very friendly environment. And there were all kinds of people there, women and men, French and English speaking, vaccinated, unvaccinated, young and old. And it was, fireworks and it was just a positive atmosphere. It was just, to me, more than anything else, Cory, what was refreshing was to see that this was still part of the Canadian spirit. I really went because I was worried. I was worried that after, 2 years of being isolated, made to be afraid of each other, told that if you're in the vicinity of other people, it's going to be catastrophic, being angry at each other, accusing each other, not being allowed to gather, not being allowed to voluntarily assemble in order to try to do the kinds of things that Canadians usually do to help each other out. I was afraid that we had lost those habits. I was afraid that we wouldn't see those again. And so my attitude was, when I wrote the article for the Western Standard, was whatever people think about the truckers themselves, whatever people think about the convoy itself, I wanted to let people know that I was really impressed, and really it was the most sort of hope-inspiring thing I've seen, to see just all around that, just ordinary Canadians across the ideological spectrum, across the socioeconomic spectrum, just pitching in and trying to do good deeds by one another in a friendly, classic Canadian way. That's what I got to see, Cory. And that's, I got to see people as well the next day over the overpass. These are hope-filled people, whatever they're being depicted like in the media. These are hope-filled people being friendly Canadians. It was really refreshing to see.
Great. Now I'll just cut in quickly, and we got a note. So finally, our pesky site is fully up and running. So to see Travis Smith's column and the news Dave was talking about and everything else, go to westernstandardonline.com. It's up and running. We got that rectified. So thanks for bearing with us. And so yes, back to you, Travis. I said it right at the start of the show, but I should also expand on it. So you're an associate professor at Concordia University, I believe, in political science.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Yes. So you've written as well on just the culture in general. I guess it's some previous columns that I've seen from you and such. And that sort of ties into this, though. I mean, you're looking at the broader social culture issues that are going on. And I mean, it's nice to see something positive, though. We don't have to give up. We're not losing.
That's what I wanted to, that was the message I wanted to say, was that, this is a sign that Canada can bounce back, and the Canadians can be Canadians again. And all these efforts that have been made to sort of drive us apart from each other and antagonize us and set us against each other, to me, it was a great hope, a great sign of hope that won't necessarily succeed. And I wanted to cheer that on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we
you're right.
just
So I have been writing a number of things across a number of venues. I decided that, so my own research originally, my dissertation was on the politics of medicine. I wrote my dissertation on, to be frank, the way in which medicine could be used to destroy liberal democracy. And I sort of, watched what was going on for the longest time, and didn't want to believe that that might be what was actually going on, because it just seems so unfathomable and unlikely. And more than anything else, what really started to motivate me to start writing was when they introduced the passport certificates. That to me was the thing that said, that's not about public health, that's a political measure. And it's not a good one. It's one that signals that our rights to voluntary consent are under threat, and in a fashion that could be rendered permanent and could, in much more thoroughgoing fashion, affect all the small aspects and details of our lives in so many ways. And I know that the politicians told us that they were temporary and limited, but they're the same politicians that told us that they wouldn't implement them. So I was wary of believing it when they put them in place like that. And so as soon as those went in place, I thought, you know what? Out of an abundance of caution, I thought I better start writing and saying, this could get bad. This could go in ways in which that are very, I don't know, un-Canadian, as it were. And I want to stand up for the country that I love and believe in, and the people that, and the character of the Canadian people. And I found it very disturbing that people were so quick to sign on to this platform in which the government was in some sort of, overbearing, domineering way going to deign to give us a tiny bit of our freedoms back if only we're willing to surrender whatever they demanded from us. And so I've written a number of pieces that have that kind of concern about them. But last weekend, when I saw what I saw, I was like, okay, maybe there's reason to think that things will turn out well rather than poorly.
Yeah, well, it's been an inspiring week. It really has. I mean, part of why the nature of government is always to just take a little more control, They are authoritarians by nature. These are people who have gotten into power because they want to run things. Even if they feel their intentions are good, they always want more and more control. That's just as natural as gravity. And they'll push it as far as the citizens will allow. And Canadians have always been very passive. We're fairly docile. We weren't a nation built out of revolution, such as the United States, for example. So we don't quite embrace, I think, that pushback against the state attitude as much. But now we seem to have hit more of a tipping point. And I think it's great because it's been a protest, it's been effective, it's been shaking the establishment, but it's still been distinctly Canadian in, as you've been pointing out, it's been polite, it's been upbeat, it's been congenial, it's been uniting, it's been waving flags. I mean, yes, again, we got that sick legacy media focused on a couple of outlying, disgusting flags and overlooking the thousands and thousands of Canadian flags. We don't even see that many flags waving proudly on Canada Day.
Right. Now, Cory, you know as well as I do, this wasn't always the reputation of Canadians, that we were wimpy or something like that. I mean, our reputation in the world wars defies that caricature. Even just growing up in the 1970s, we were rough and tumble, beer drinking, hockey playing, body checking guys, and so the sort of attitude that you don't mess with Canadians was a stereotype. Up until more recently, I think. And what's interesting is, the images we're getting are, as much as the media wants to depict what's going on in places like Ottawa as if it were, the most violent and the most vile sorts of people engaging in wanton acts of destruction. If that was the case, the footage of that would be everywhere. But they don't have the footage of that because that's not what's happening. These are your neighbors. These are the people that supply you with the goods that you need to live your life. These are the people we go to the pub with and have a conversation with at the bar. These are the people that we hang out with and play a game of euchre with. And so it's just striking the difference between what I see and what I'm familiar with and the way in which it's being depicted by the Prime Minister and by his agents in the media.
Well, that's why it's been so. I mean, that's the other thing that's heartened me is watching. People haven't fallen for what the mainstream's done. They overplayed their hand. I mean, people can see through just how badly they've gotten, and alternative outlets like ourselves have turned into a go-to. We've gotten I mean, a boon out of this. People have finally said that's enough out of the mainstream, and they're coming in droves to outlets such as ours and Candace's True North or Rebel and other places where they can bypass it. And then the ability for people like yourself to say, well, I'm going to get up and go out on the ground and just see for myself. I mean, if you'd have gone there, I imagine, and they were all vicious and nasty and spitting at you,
I would have left in an instant. I'm an anxious person, Cory. I'm an academic. I just prefer to keep with my books and my teach my classes. I'm not an activist.
Well, that's it. And you probably would have written
in my comfort zone to go there.
Yeah, and you would have written saying, geez, I hate to say it, but we've got a bunch of crazy people heading to Ottawa. I wanted to see something nice.
I would have raised that alarm in an instant. Absolutely.
Yeah. And,
and that's not the vibe I got at all. Can you imagine what the overpasses would have been like if it was positive 20 degrees out instead of minus 20?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's a factor for older people, mobility challenged, or just general comfort. It depends on how dedicated they are. That's a chilly place to go standing around outdoors. I was a surveyor for 20 years. It's unpleasant. So you better be pretty dedicated to get out there. And thousands were. And we saw Hutterites out there. I don't think maybe some Eastern viewers now who don't have a lot of experience with Hutterites don't realize how significant that is. I mean, these are usually some of the most politically impartial people around. They just want to be left alone. They're on the colony. They have their thing, and they stay out of politics if at all possible. And they were out because they're also business people. They're also, and some Hutterite leaders were saying they're not anti-vaccination. The majority of Hutterites have gone in and got vaccinated, but they drive trucks. They have businesses, they're farmers, and they're concerned for this. And again, this needs to be reported on. You know, we're seeing something happening in Canada we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, this is the portrait that they're trying to portray is trying to minimize the diversity of people who are concerned about policies like the mandates and the lockdowns. I mean, the portrait they're trying to play is false. And it's not only false. I can't be the only one who finds it disturbing that our own prime minister seems to suggest that people of color and women don't want to be free and don't like freedom. I don't get that. I don't know why that's acceptable for him to be implying.
Of all people, he's one who really shouldn't be speaking on behalf of people of color. But I mean, again, he takes it upon himself as the woke, self-styled messiah of political correctness, I think, and people are seeing through it, I think.
We started seeing some really ugly rhetoric out of him during the campaign, and if anyone should be accused of speaking hate, some of the language that he's put in some of his interviews then and since then, deliberately trying to manufacture division, trying to set Canadians against each other, make them distrust each other, make them, ready to accuse each other or worse. When all Canadians ought to be realizing by now who's actually been responsible for the misery that they've been enduring for so long. But it's a kind of misdirection. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book for political leaders to make sure that they don't take responsibility for themselves and trying to accuse the people that they've harmed of being the guilty parties, so that the other people who've been harmed can direct their anger at them instead.
Yeah, well, and we're starting to see through and around it, and means through things such as social media, communication, independent media like ours. We're getting to the citizens without that filter of the establishment out there. But I noticed that, of course, Bill C-10 has reared its ugly head again, and the government, it's kind of a curveball. I know you hadn't spoke on it before, but it seems an indication the government's worried about having their messaging bypassed, and here they come again to see if they can find ways to control the information that's leaking beyond their gatekeeping.
Look, the whole discourse around misinformation stinks of the discourse in the PRC about what they call rumor mongering, where you can be accused of crimes if you're engaged in rumor mongering. And this is disturbing. I've got a close friend of mine who's from Beijing, who came to Canada, became a Canadian citizen. My son and I went and stood there for him at a citizenship ceremony. And he says to me that he can't believe how much Canada looks and sounds like the place that he left behind him now. And it's very distressing. And something like that degree of censorship is very concerning.
It is, absolutely. And I don't think they will get away with it. I don't. But it could turn into a very ugly battle. I mean, social media, control of information, the world has changed. The best the government can do is play whack-a-mole. But for every source they block in one spot, it'll spring out in 5 others. But again, they can really divide us and make quite a mess in their efforts to do so. We're concerned at the Western Standard. I mean, we're doing fantastic as an alternative media outlet. We would be the low-hanging fruit out there because we are a legitimate media company. We're a registered company. There's a number of licensing things or things that the state could do to try to shun our message. But then other individual voices, independent ones, will spring out of the sides and make up for it. But they could really just harm this new development of free exchange of information, and I'm kind of worried about it.
It's pretty much, an attack upon another attack upon another one of our most fundamental rights.
Yeah.
This increasing sort of idea that there's no aspect of the lives of citizens that shouldn't be regulated into oblivion.
Well, I'm optimistic and apprehensive at the same time. I really appreciated, you're getting off your butt and going out there in person so you can tell us, the people who haven't been able to see it necessarily face to face, that indeed, this isn't a violent or crazy or nasty movement. These are genuine Canadians expressing themselves. And I'm certain the ones that are still on the Hill are just the same. So in closing, that's an assistant professor of political science at Concordia University, and columnist for the Western Standard occasionally, Travis Smith. Where else can we find more information on what you're up to and where you're writing and such, Travis?
People can find me at 22 Travis G. Smith. And I've written articles on COVID times in Convivium and for the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship, among other places.
Great. Yeah, that's one of the ones I was referencing, Convivium. So if you look that up, then there's some great extended pieces in there for more reading on your thoughts on all those things.
Yeah,
so
there's a couple of articles that I wrote back last fall, October, November, where I posed the question as to whether or not we're living in a place called not Canada.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your work and I appreciate you joining us today, Travis. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Be happy to be back on the show. Thank you very much for having me today, Cory. Wish you all the best. I hope everybody is taking care of themselves and taking care of each other there.
And to you. Thanks, Travis. So there we go. And, I really like to run just those counterpoints. And you know what? If there had been, I've talked about that in past shows before. I went to protests here in Calgary that were smaller, and unfortunately the tone wasn't good. It wasn't rational. And I reported as much. I was disappointed. I was hoping to see, a better thing developing. And this Truckers for Freedom convoy has done that. The same people are involved, as always have been, but there's such a larger number of people now that they aren't getting sidelined or sidetracked by the less rational folks perhaps in the midst. Yeah, sorry, I got a little sidetracked there with some of those commentary, from Brad Hagen. An interesting thing, and Derek was saying it in the newsroom this morning, and we see memes about it, and there's a lot of truth about it, is everything that was a conspiracy theory, a couple of years ago is becoming fact today. Not everything yet. There's still some pretty crazy conspiracy theories out there. I don't think the lizard people are running around or that we're being controlled by microchips from Bill Gates or anything. But some of them are definitely coming along. I spoke to somebody else about, the Great Reset. It's unfortunate that it's called that because even off the bat, it sounds almost a little conspiratorial. And people dismiss it, but this is from the World Economic Forum. This is their own words. You can look it up. Great Reset. So Brad brought that up because Justin Trudeau spoke to that World Economic Forum. He talked to them. And he said in other interviews, if you Google that stuff, Justin Trudeau talks about Great Reset and what that theory is. It's a thought of pursuing a socialist paradise. If we could just break down the system hard enough, we can rebuild it into something, in their eyes, beautiful, which it tends to be a very socialist world that doesn't involve individualism. It's not a conspiracy theory. It really is something that some of these people believe in Ottawa, not all of them. But Justin Trudeau, it does seem to be an adherent to it. And they see this pandemic as an opportunity rather than a tragedy, a problem. They see a bigger end to this than just hindering the spread of a virus. They're looking at a way to reset the population. And as Brad's saying, perhaps reset the banking system. And I know Brad differs with me on some of these things, but that's okay. That's what we're allowed, and that's what we do. And I did see the video, Brad, but I am going to talk about getting out of what is the conventional banking system back to bitcoinwell.com and with digital currencies. These guys are our sponsor. They've been great with us. And if you do want to learn more about it, this is where you can go. Again, it's non-custodial. You're looking to dip your toe into the digital currency world, or you're looking to dive in. These are the guys to help you there. They're a Western Canadian company. They're registered on the stock market. Like they are publicly traded. It's a safe place to do business. You hang on to it. It's in your wallet. You control it. And they have in-person white glove service, so you're not talking to some distant soul in a call center or something like that. In Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, and Winnipeg, you can set an appointment and sit down one-on-one and talk to a representative from Bitcoin Well. Like, this is a real business like anything else, like a bank. They'll help you set up your wallet, help you understand it. And if you're from outside of those cities, you can still do it, through virtual meetings online. And so check these guys out. Go to bitcoinwell.com. You can buy Bitcoin in person, even take control of your wealth. So that's where we are with that sponsor. I want to go on to a good news story. We're going to check in with James Finkbeiner pretty soon here. But, I'm always negative. I'm always crabby and things like that. For those familiar with him, Stephen Carter has been fired again. Stephen Carter was the weenie behind the leader. He always is. That's his role. And with every leader, you always have one. You have the, person behind Mr. Burns. What's his name again on The Simpsons? Why am I forgetting that? Either way, but I mean, he's even more principled than Stephen Carter. Carter was, yes, there's the cover from The Sun, Chief of Stiff, he was called. That was put out just shortly after, I believe, he got fired from Premier Redford's office. This guy shows up like a rash on Alberta politics, has for quite some years. So I'll give a little bit of history of him. Yeah, he was at Redford's office. He managed to be the campaign manager who got Nenshi elected, but I think him and Nenshi parted ways later. He always parts ways with his employers pretty quickly afterwards. He moved on. He was with the Wild Rose Party, unfortunately, while I was in the Wild Rose Party on the board. He didn't last very long there before he left in scandal. And then, unfortunately, and maybe as we talk about the book down the road, somebody at the Wild Rose Party foolishly hired him yet again. And he quit, I think only a couple months afterwards. And of course, had all that information. Where's he go? To Alison Redford's office to work for Premier Redford with another party. I mean, this is a man who just, wherever his bills are paid, he'll go. So he went on from that. He went on to, what's her name? Sandra Jansen, if those people remember that hysteric, opportunistic, progressive, conservative member of the legislature. She was always playing the victim, going on, but to be honest, what she was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. She was in Jim Prentice's government. She actually tabled legislation to hinder gay-straight alliances in schools, and when that all fell apart, she suddenly tried to model herself as a defender of rights for the LGBTQ community. Then she crossed the floor to the NDP, from the Conservatives to the NDP, in order to get a cabinet seat. Of course, she said, no, I'm not there to get a cabinet seat. I'm there to be there. Well, she got put into cabinet. And then before the election loomed, it looked like she was going to lose her seat. She left Rachel Notley hanging and quit without notice and vanished from the political scene. We don't miss her. I kind of miss her for some of the comic relief. Either way, going farther back, Stephen Carter, for a short period, was her campaign manager as she tried and failed to run for the Progressive Conservative Party leadership. They didn't even manage to get enough signatures to get her name on the ballot. She claimed, of course, it was prejudice and she was a victim and that's why she didn't run. But it's baloney. It's because nobody supported her. Carter then moved on to the Alberta Party. Now, my timelines might be a little bumped around here. But the Alberta Party was this group that, they've been around. They're still around. They try to keep saying, we're the middle, we're not the left, we're not the right. And what it leads to all the time is electoral obliteration. Though they did have one leader who was doing really well, and he won a seat in Calgary Elbow, I believe it was. And man, I am terrible with names sometimes. He was a really good guy, actually. That's part of why he won. He won on the force of his own personality. But Stephen Carter and some other progressive conservative hacks got in there and said, we can fix this Alberta Party. And they managed to actually push the leader aside, the popular leader, the one who had his seat. And they brought in the former mayor of Edmonton, Stephen Mandel, in there and said, this is how we're going to win. Well, Stephen Mandel led the Alberta Party into electoral obliteration. They lost the one seat they had. And I think they had a floor crosser who gave them a seat for a bit too or something. But it was the end of the thing. And then Carter just kind of marched off onto another thing. He set up a business deal. That's what the Chief of Stiff thing was about, that it was supposed to involve a big show with the Dalai Lama and a bunch of things. And it all fell apart and went to crap. And a number of creditors got hooped. That's why he's known as Chief of Stiff. And either way, all the way along the lines, he managed Jyoti Gondek's campaign in Calgary to be mayor. And she won. And after, right on the 100th day of her being in, Carter got fired. So, I mean, he's a guy who'll do anything to win. It makes for, I guess, you know, if you're not worried about principle and things, a good campaign manager, if your goal is just to get in and nothing else, he pulls that off. He's done it multiple times. But once he's in there, they can't tolerate that weasel, and he ends out on his butt. Dave's been reporting on that, and there's a number of background as to why he got fired. He said to the news yesterday that he didn't know, but it sounds like a lot of people do, and we'll be hearing more about it. So either way, there's your good news story for today. I mean, it's not too ongoing because guys like him are never gone. He will just surface somewhere else. But for the time being, he is not in the mayor's office, and I'm happy for that. Good luck on your job hunt, Stephen. Looks good on you. By the way, just a teaser for at the end of the show, something different and on a positive note. I got a fantastic thing we'll play at the end. As we were talking, patriotic, upbeat things from the protests. Well, we got a version of the national anthem that is fantastic and quite fun. And we will play that at the end of the show for those of you who are still with us at that time. That's what I'm saying. Stick with us. We've got stuff going all the way along. Just another reminder, I'm going to be checking in pretty quickly here. As Brad just said, anything new on Coutts? I'm going to find out pretty quickly in a couple of minutes here. I'm going to bring James in. He's been languishing down there for days, live, interacting with the people, getting direct news. And that's what's important. Again, there's so many rumors. I mean, everything's turning on a dime so fast. It's so important to get people on the ground and see. That's what was great with Travis. That's what's great with James down there. You know, they can at least talk one-on-one. It's still hard, you know. I mean, it's hard for James. He's got a ground level view in one spot, and everything's now spread out. They're up by Milk River. They're down by Coutts, and we're talking distances of 20, 30 kilometers away. So think of it like a football game. You know, if you got seats right on the edge of the field, hey, it's excellent for the experience of the game. But in reality, if you're sitting way up on the nosebleeds, you're going to see a whole lot more of the game. You need that balance between those perspectives. So James is down on the ground, and he's tracking it as fast and furiously as he can. He's doing a fantastic job. But sometimes, you hear one thing down the south end of the protest, and there's a different thing happening in the north end. So it's constantly unfolding and changing as we go. Yes, let's see. Mike Thomas. Yes, I had him on the show. Oh, wait a minute. Looks like James is here. Oh, okay. Well, we're live and things happen. Why not? I was just going to ramble about Mike Thomas. Anyways, if James is ready to talk, I'll take him in and we'll get an update. How you doing, James?
I'm good. How are you, Cory?
Good. Well, you look warm and indoors. That's good. It's a little better out there today, isn't it?
It's way better today. The wind almost feels warm today. It's still, I think it's -10 still, but it feels a whole lot warmer.
So you've been entrenched down there for days now on the Coutts trucker border convoy blockade, siege, whatever description we want to do day by day as things evolve. Where are things standing right now? Maybe give us a rundown.
Today is probably the most dynamic, fluid day that's been going on down here. Things are changing minute by minute by minute. But you know what? The word of the day today is de-escalation. I think every group down here has kind of come off of a hardline position, and they're talking to each other. They're negotiating with each other. Nobody's worried about SWAT vehicles rolling in anymore. Nobody's worried about mass arrests. Nobody's worried about truckers getting pulled out of their trucks. Nobody's worried about the blockades being blown by tractors today. Things are at a very calm place right now. That's not to say things won't change, because the truckers are telling me that they're going to hold the line, and that's what they're going to do, is hold the line.
Okay, so it's been back and forth, as you said, though, and fluid. There were some changes. Like they did start opening up and letting traffic through. Part of it, what people have to understand, is like there's more than one blockade. So in order for that to work, the RCMP have to actually open up farther north and let traffic through. And it's gotten some commercial vehicles through to the border, but there's still hindrances going on.
Yeah, so just to give you a bit of a timeline, Cory. Yesterday afternoon, shortly after our show, we had some breaking news from the group. They had been in communication with a group of MLAs, and it was originally reported to us that they had struck a deal. They had struck a deal with the MLAs. That turned out to be a miscommunication between the massive group of protesters here, and essentially there's part of the group is working with the MLAs, part of the group are working with lawyers, part of the group are working with farmers, part of the group are working with truckers, and that's the thing with this kind of protest is it's not one group that's leading this. There are several groups that's leading this. So there's been so much discussion and confusion around the discussion that's going on, that everybody just kind of said, like, we don't know what's going on. But what ended up happening was the truckers, as a show of good faith, pulled to the shoulder of the road, opened up a lane in both directions, in and out of the village of Coutts, opened access to the border, moved out of the way, and said, we're not leaving, we're holding the line, but we are not going to create an illegal blockade anymore. There's no illegal blockade at Coutts. So from there, over the course of the day, more protesters who had originally left the original protest from Saturday and others that have wanted to join the protest started to arrive at the Milk River checkpoint, the police checkpoint. Now, there has been a group down there since Saturday, since the police checkpoint went up. The majority of them, there's about a core group down there of 25 to 50 people that have stayed basically since that checkpoint went up. There's also been, another 50 to 100 other protesters that have joined that area to support them. Last night I went down, I talked to them earlier in the evening. I asked them, why are you guys here? What brought you guys here? And they said, we're here to show the guys in Coutts that they have support. They're not alone. We're here to hold the line with them. Over the course of the evening, commercial traffic was restored to the border at about 11 o'clock. Two commercial vehicles passed through the police checkpoint, and we followed them all the way back to the border. We watched them cross through. They made it. They made it all the way from Milk River, all the way into the United States, completely unencumbered. Nobody pulled out, nobody stopped them, nothing happened. Around that time, discussions with the two different groups, the group at Milk River and the group at Coutts, they started talking to the RCMP, and they said, well, there you go. There's your proof that we've done what we've been asked to do. Can the protest groups join each other? And the answer has been no. The RCMP have not let any additional protesters down to the Coutts site. There is a checkpoint there. They're letting locals through, they're letting media through, and they're letting the occasional commercial vehicle through. I do not want to say that they are letting every commercial vehicle through, because I haven't talked to the RCMP about it. I asked the sheriffs about it on my way through earlier, and they said, well, it depends. And that's the other thing. They have sheriffs down here, they have RCMP down here. I have seen Lethbridge Municipal Police down here. With the rolling protests across the province, the RCMP, the sheriffs, everybody are spread thin. They are moving around and responding to everything as they can. So it's a fluid situation across the whole province right now, Cory. But I drove down to Milk River this morning. I wanted to go see what was happening down there. And I tell you, I drove all the way from Coutts, all the way through Milk River. There was a clear lane open all the way through. There was a clear lane open all the way back. And it's not the zigzagging clear lane that it was before. It's a straight shot all the way through. There's no obstacles in the middle of the lane. And as I understand it, right now, the protest vehicles are moving further out of the driving lanes and onto the shoulder.
Yeah, so things sound like they're calming down. I mean, part of it was prefaced on, some of the negotiations. There was some misinterpretation about potentially a number of MLAs who were negotiating or might be coming down. It sounds like some sources said there were some perhaps acting on their own, but it never had the sanction of the United Conservative Party. At the Western Standard, I mean, we got the sources saying the UCP MLAs were told to stall for time over ending these COVID restrictions. It sounds like the government is backing down provincially, but they're doing it slowly and painfully, and not necessarily. They don't want to admit it's in response to this protest, I suspect.
That's what I'm actually being told by a lot of the protesters down here today. Is that's what they're hearing. they're hearing from their MLA contacts. And I got to tell you, a lot of these rural MLAs have been responding to their constituents. I've been told like several different examples of where these people have reached out to their MLAs. They've sent them pictures. They've been communicating with them. The MLAs are in communication with their constituents. And I mean, just like the truckers right now and differing opinions on how they want to handle this protest and what they should do, the MLAs are having the exact same situation. I think everybody just wants to do what the right thing, and I think they're trying to get there. They're just working out how to get there right now.
Yeah, well, and to complicate an already complicated situation, we do have a premier who's facing a leadership review in April. A lot of people speculated he was holding the restrictions almost as a card in his pocket that he could drop before then and drop the restrictions and make everybody happy. But now he's moving it up and he's moving it up. And now he's even saying it's going to come quickly, but it makes it difficult for him to keep caucus under control when there's a lot of, unfortunately, politics being played here. I mean, he doesn't have that control over all of those MLAs that a stronger premier or as he did when he was stronger himself in the past. So it's hard to get a clear message from elected officials right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've kind of seen that the whole way through. Like you've got Todd Lowens, you've got Drew Barnes, you've got the rebels inside the caucus. And there's just been a lot of mixed messaging. The way people feel in the cities is not the way people feel in the country, and it's reflected from their constituents up to their MLAs, and then their MLAs try to represent them, and they're getting head off. And just like these rural Albertans, these truckers, these hardworking blue collar people feel like they're not being listened to. A lot of these MLAs are feeling the same way right now. I've tried reaching out to a couple of them. I haven't got any responses back as of yet. They've been coordinating a lot of stuff. They've been helping to de-escalate this situation. And earlier this week, there was just a vacuum of political leadership. Nobody was stepping into any kind of role. Nobody was talking this situation down. And you know what? When they started talking to these protesters, that's when things started to de-escalate. That when these truckers felt like they were being listened to, that's when the situation came down. But they want to be clear. They are backing down, but they are holding the line. They are not forming an illegal blockade, but they are not ending their protests. They are staying here. There's only been a couple of protesters that have left, and they left in response to commercial traffic being let through last night. There was a few tense moments last night. Around 11 o'clock, those commercial vehicles came through. By about 12 o'clock last night, the Milk River protesters blockaded the southbound lanes. They would not let commercial vehicles through there anymore. And by about 1:30, we started receiving reports that there was farm equipment and tractors with dozers coming to blow the police line. And I raced back down there. I was there till almost 3 o'clock this morning. The tractors did show up. There was an extremely frustrated protester operating that tractor. And the other protesters got out in front of that tractor and they talked him down. They said, look, this is not going to help anything. This is not going to change the minds of anyone. This is not going to win hearts over to our cause. So calm down. And you know what? He calmed down. He shut his unit off. He backed away. They de-escalated the situation, and everything remained calm all the way until this morning. This morning they had some meetings. The group at Coutts drove down to talk to the group at Milk River. They said, guys, we need open lanes. We do not want to form an illegal blockade. And they have opened up the lanes. I have some video that I'm going to get out here as soon as I possibly can, showing that the lanes are open all the way to Milk River and all the way from Milk River back to the border.
Great. And something you said, it was very important, and it's worth transferring, because we got protests, of course, all across the country, particularly the one in Ottawa, and how a lot of them just want to know that their voices are getting heard at the higher levels of power. I mean, some people are saying all or nothing, will never budge until we get everything. But a lot of people are reasonable. Like if they know it's being respectfully listened to, it can already calm things. And in Ottawa, we have none of that. The Prime Minister won't even acknowledge the thousands of people up there. I mean, I understand okay, he doesn't have to come up and say, yeah, you're right, and I'm going to reverse all of my mandates, or I don't expect to go in there and shake hands and meet with them in person, but acknowledge them, respect them, listen to them. And you know what? It's a better, if you don't like them blocking things up, that's a more effective way to get them to stop rather than insulting them. Like, you know, Justin Trudeau, if you remember in the past, he went into the teepee of the fake hunger striker, Teresa Spence, the one who managed to actually gain weight on a hunger strike. He took her seriously enough to go right into the teepee and spend some time with her. Or with Black Lives Matter, I mean, they were rioting all over the country, and Justin goes out there and kneels with them. Now, I don't expect such, behavior perhaps with this protest, but as you found down there, and I'm certain the mindset of the demonstrators is similar all over. If they could just be respectfully heard, they can start to work towards a resolution of all this.
Oh, exactly, Cory. You know what surprises me is that the words that everybody uses for the police is de-escalation. Why can't you guys de-escalate a situation? Why does it always end in violence? And what we're seeing is Justin Trudeau and Jason Kenney have poured gasoline on this fire by accusing them of assaulting police officers, of being racist, of being white supremacists, and you know, all of these things are just fundamentally untrue. The mainstream media is reporting this Nazi flag like every single protester that went there is carrying this Nazi flag, and these people are sitting here looking at each other and saying, this isn't what's happening. We just want to be listened to. We want to feel like the people that we elected to represent us are listening to us. And once they started getting that, this situation here de-escalated. And I think if our leaders would have approached the situation by saying, we're listening to you, we understand, we're going to work at this together, I don't think we would have got to this point. And I know that's offering my opinion and stretching there, but I've been with these guys for 6 days now. I have not seen any violence. I've seen a lot of prayer. I've seen a lot of thoughtful conversation, and they just have been painted in a different light. And it's important today to see that the protesters are de-escalating. The RCMP have asked them de-escalate. And at every possible chance, both the protesters and the police have de-escalated. And I think that is a very positive message from this.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not just your opinion, because you are reporting on what you've seen down there. I mean, if they wanted to remain intransigent, if they were still upset, those trucks would still be fully blocking that road. They never would have backed off. Things might even have gotten, unfortunately, violent if things had stayed entrenched. I mean, you have to have a vent. You know, the pressure keeps building up. And these guys have shown they're willing to back off a little. They're not leaving the site, but they're seeing reason, and they'll move. We've seen heated social media voices and fools saying, "Oh, just get in there with the bulldozers and move them," or just That's, even if you had the equipment, that's a recipe to take a peaceful situation, even if it's frustrating, and turn it terribly violent, and people will get hurt. And that's just a ridiculous approach. This has been, I think, so far. I mean, there's lots of fingers to point, but a good example of behavior on the part of the police and the protesters. I mean, there's some mistakes on both sides, but they're working towards resolution.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's going on. There's a group of protesters here at Coutts and a secondary group of protesters at Milk River. Both groups are talking to each other. They're talking to their local MLAs. They're talking to the RCMP, and they're talking to the lawyer that they've retained. And all of them are listening to each other, and they're taking cues from each other. And as one group backs off, another group backs off. As the drivers here cleared the lanes and opened the lanes up, the RCMP presence just greatly reduced. At one point, that you could look every direction, and you would see headlights and flashing lights at night. There was checkpoints all over the place. Those have backed off for the most part now. You don't have an RCMP vehicle on every corner in the village of Coutts anymore. And you know what? Last night, it took them 9.5 hours, I was told, but police on guard actually brought down food, and the RCMP escorted them from the Milk River checkpoint to the Coutts Saloon. And they came in. They had a meal together. They talked about their fears. They talked about their frustrations. And there was some great dialogue going on in there. It was just great to see.
Great.
You know, the RCMP's taken a lot of heat for a lot of stuff for a long time. We've seen the Calgary police and their interactions with hockey players and arresting pastors and just all of this craziness over the course of the pandemic. And what we're seeing here is just the opposite of that. They are meeting with these people. They are respecting them. No one's yelling at each other. No one's threatening each other. It's been calm, respectful conversations. Even as the RCMP was doing the original line and we live streamed it, and they were going truck to truck to truck. They were knocking on the doors and they were telling the drivers, you can drive out of here right now or you can be arrested. And some of them left. Some of them drove away. Some of them just got out of their trucks and walked to the back of the line with the rest of the protesters. The RCMP could have drugged those people out of those trucks, arrested them, and taken them to jail, and they didn't. And by not doing that, they de-escalated the situation. The truckers moved off to the side. They opened up the lanes, but they are saying they are going to stay here. They want the government to make changes, and they're going to stay here until that happens.
No, and it's good we can give credit where it's due and getting those reports from the ground. Before I let you go, and I want to talk a bit about where people can find you, because you keep updating and we'll keep breaking in live if anything does develop and get rolling. Both Cheryl and Jason did ask, though there was a rumor, I think we clarified that at the newsroom this morning, about Paul Brandt showing up there. I don't believe there's been any direct evidence that really happened, and perhaps that might be an internet rumor, unfortunately.
It sounds like it's a rumor.
Yeah.
It's a rumor. It's definitely going around. I've heard it a lot here. I have been asking as many people as I can about it, and nobody has seen him.
Yeah, I think it's probably in the realm. I mean, Paul Brandt's been very supportive of things and outspoken on them, but I suspect that this one might just be the realm of things. But that's important, and that's part of the commenting thing with a live show. You know, people want to get their questions in. You've been on the ground, and so who knows? Maybe he snuck in and out of there. Nobody quite noticed it, but more than likely it might have been just a rumor. So where somebody's saying we have a photo. Yeah, nobody's been able to identify Paul in that photo, I'm afraid.
I actually passed that photo around last night, and one of the ladies that's in that photo told me that she's in that photo and Paul Brandt is not in that photo. So unless Paul Brandt himself says that he's in that picture, I am not going to confirm that, because I have tried. I have asked a lot of people, and they have all told me that that's not Paul Brandt and he is not in that picture.
Yeah, and others are referencing the picture as well. If it gets confirmed, I mean, hey, we'll report it. I mean, it'd be a pretty cool thing. We don't want to hide it if he was down there, but as it stands, we can't say it if we don't have proof. So at that point, but we gave what we know on the ground. So as people have seen as well, you'll pop in. I mean, we're not sure when Derek's going to let you come back to Calgary, but if anything breaks, you, of course, will come in with live coverage. And where can we watch, like, your Twitter account there and such, because you tweet things as soon as they happen?
Yeah, I've been live tweeting from my Twitter account. My Twitter handle is at Jimmy Bianchi. I believe you've retweeted a lot of my stuff, so your followers can find me there as well. Other than that, I've been sending my reports back to the newsroom. Mel Risden's been writing the story for us. She's been keeping us updated. She's been doing a great job. Her and I are in constant contact. Other than that, if you need to reach out to me, you can send me an email, jfinkbeiner@westernstandardonline.com.
Great. Thanks, James. I'll let you get back to things down there. I appreciate the, direct news and information. We will talk again soon, I'm sure.
Thanks a lot, Cory. Take care.
All right, so quickly, I'm going to get to our next guest pretty soon. He's in the lobby there. I just do want to quickly remind everybody, if you haven't already, subscribe to whatever social media channel you're watching on right now. Because as I said, when we get breaking things, as happened a couple of times over the last few days, we will go on and do that. And if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel or the Rumble or Facebook, you'll get an alert so you know what's happening right when it's happening. As you see with James, we have people on the ground at these events as they happen, or when Aaron O'Toole suddenly found himself out of the leader's seat yesterday, Derek and I jumped right in with a live coverage of that. So be sure to subscribe on all those social media channels and share it. And then you can bypass that mainstream media that only gives you little snippets of things. So I'm going to talk to, getting on to O'Toole and his leadership. Kerry Diotte, people might, in Alberta, everybody knows who he is, but he was a member of Parliament for Edmonton Griesba from 2015 to 2021, an Edmonton City Councillor from 2010 to 2013, and then he was a journalist in radio, TV, and newspapers a lot in Edmonton. He was with the Edmonton Sun since the mid-'80s. I read many of his columns as I read politics in growing, so it's great to have him on, and we'll bring him in and let's talk about the other unfolding event going on. While Canada's going crazy, we're suddenly into a Conservative leadership race. Hey, Kerry, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Cory. How are you?
Very good, thanks. There's certainly, at least for a news organization, plenty to keep us occupied these days. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative. So I appreciate you coming in. We knew there was a lot of threats to Erin O'Toole's leadership, leading up to this, but still, it seemed to come quite suddenly and quite decisively. I mean, that wasn't a close vote.
No, it wasn't, and I think that it all started essentially back way before the election was called on the whole carbon tax issue, because we were not consulted about it. It was kind of sprung on us, and I think that in 2019, when I would go to the doors and knock on doors and say, "Hey, do you want to get rid of the carbon tax?" People go, "Absolutely. Okay, so vote for me. We'll get rid of Trudeau and the carbon tax." It took a huge plank out of our platform. And despite what anybody said, even though if you could try to argue it wasn't really a tax, it was a savings plan. I had people at the doors tell me, "You know what, I like Trudeau's plan better because I get money in my pocket." So it was an experiment that didn't work.
Yeah, and I mean that there were a number of people perhaps who weren't happy with some of the stances that Mr. O'Toole had taken, but personally for me that was the big one too, because it was just such a clear and flagrant flip-flop. I mean, the Taxpayers Federation had a picture of him standing next to a sign signing saying he will never do that. I mean, you couldn't talk around that and say that you didn't claim otherwise, and it wasn't like it was 10 years earlier when he made that pledge. That was just a short time before the election, so that certainly frustrated people and lost a lot of confidence in him.
And of course, the thing that was being told to us at the time, and we all sort of somewhat accepted it a little bit. We said, look, we've got to win seats around the big areas, around Metro Toronto. We've got to do these kinds of things. We've got to do these kinds of measures. And I personally did not like it, but I would go to the doors and explain it to people and say, look, this is the rationale. They would be upset. I'd say, this is the rationale. This is a way that we can win. Give it a try. But obviously, those kinds of stances did not win us the election. So I think from there, it was the beginning of the end for Erin's vision. It really was.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll move on from Erin. He clearly took his kick at the can. He didn't win the election. He lost the confidence of his own caucus, and now he's no longer the leader. So, I mean, we can always dissect and look a little further back into that. But now looking forward, we're going into a leadership race. One name we know isn't going to throw her name in the hat, I guess, is Candice Bergen, because she's taken on the role of interim leader. What do you see developing now? I mean, they're kind of in a rush. We got a minority government. You can't have a really protracted leadership race at this point.
No, I think you're right. Let's face it, a government could fall at any time. Nobody knows exactly what could happen, and it's a very volatile time in society. So first off, Candice is a really good choice. She's good, she's solid, she's conservative, she's well respected, and she will do as well as an interim leader. Obviously, the first name that pops up in everybody's mind is Pierre Poilievre, and there are so many people who are not even big political junkies who say, that guy, that Pierre, yeah, I like that Pierre. What's his name? Poilievre, yeah, that guy. We like that guy. So he would have a huge influence in Alberta. We would kick butt in Alberta if we chose him as a leader, assuming he goes for it. And he's got some difficult choices to make. He's got a young family, but he has, what I like about Pierre, he's got a built-in following. He is, I loved his clip the other day when the CBC was going on about the demonstrators, and he just talked. I think everybody saw it. He talked about the fact that the CBC doesn't demonize left-wing protesters the way they demonized the trucker protests, and he really put them in their place. It was great.
Yeah, he's been fantastic. I mean, there's no denying Pierre's smart as a whip, and he's quick on his feet. And something, though, you know Pierre better not. You've had more interaction with him. There's different types of skills. That's something I sort of talked about, what I think kind of happened with Premier Kenney. You know, he was a magnificent cabinet minister, but he's really having some challenges as a leader and a premier. I think, and nobody can deny it, Jason Kenney's a hardworking, smart man, but he just can't seem to quite get the leadership thing rolling. Does Pierre Poilievre now, he's been an incredible opposition member. He holds him to account. I think that's almost part of, even though he didn't purposely, what harmed O'Toole, because he would steal the spotlight because he was so effective in holding government to account in the Parliament. Do you think, though, Pierre has then what it takes to pivot into a leadership role? You know, talking to caucus, uniting caucus, and getting that broader appeal across Canadians rather than the ones he already has.
Well, I certainly know what the media will say right off the bat, and they've already started talking about that. They'll say the party is pivoting hard right. The party is going alt-right. It's just, again, it's the media narrative, and it drives me crazy. As a longtime journalist who I worked in journalism for 30 years, I am just embarrassed by the mainstream media. But I never realized until I became a member of Parliament how anti-conservative they are and how anti-fair they are. It's embarrassing. They're cheerleading lockdowns. They're cheerleading trying to get rid of protesters in Ottawa. It's an embarrassment, and they will go after the likes of Pierre or anybody that comes from the conservative, the true conservative side of the Conservative Party as some kind of alt-right. And I think Canadians will tune it out. If you look at here's an interesting stat to talk about how people view things right now. The truckers raised $10 million from average ordinary Canadians before the GoFundMe page was shut down. That's more than all the major political parties in Canada raised in the last quarter. So that tells you there's a movement there. And I know that people like Pierre, people who are true to conservative roots, can tap into that movement. People are sick of this middle of the road, namby-pamby, try to please the left scenario. We're never going to get some people to vote for us, never. And by playing up to them is a huge mistake. These people will never vote for us.
No, and that's good, to hear. And we're hearing it from a lot of former journalists, and even Rex Murphy. I mean, an icon of the CBC, but he can't help but speak now on how rotten that institution has become. And yes, but what I've gotten excited about, as you pointed out with the fundraiser, for example, and the amount of attention, and of course, with people like us at the Western Standard, the legacy media aren't the gatekeepers of information anymore. They can't stop it. It's like they put up a dam and the water's just flowing around and it's getting to people despite their best efforts. And as you said, people are starting to tune them out. So yeah, if the next leader of the Conservatives isn't reactive to them, they could probably, blunt that weapon.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? The reason that the People's Party got such a bump in the last election is that nobody seemed to be speaking for a lot of Canadians. And I think that if we have a solid person with conservative values, real conservative values, it will spell the end of the PPC, essentially. But we, in the last little while, under the previous leader, unfortunately, were too afraid to be unapologetically conservative. And that's not alt-right. That's just conservative values. We care about freedom. We care about family, we care about balanced budgets, and we care about private property rights. That's what most Canadians care about. So we've got to start reflecting what Canadians think. And you think about how if you saw the scenes when the truckers went across the country, people came out by the thousands to cheer them on like heroes. So we've got to tap into that market. And if we're missing that market, we're missing the heart of Canadians.
Yeah, well, so going to the other end of it, this race is probably going to develop with people with different visions and views. Where, I mean, it's going to be a race between, Pierre is clearly in the small C conservative camp, assuming he decides to run. I mean, we're being presumptuous, but he's certainly the most popular at this point. Where would the progressive voice come from? Do you think Peter MacKay would throw his hat in again, or Michelle Rempel-Garner, or some of, Chong even?
There's certainly been rumors around that. I think that we will probably have a few because it's a good gig. Let's face it, but it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of effort. I know that my former colleague Marilyn Gladue has talked about it. I've got a lot of respect for her. She comes from a good background as an engineer, as somebody who's very pro energy, and her French is quite good. And that's the one thing. Maybe Albertans don't want to hear this, but it's true. You need a good command of French language to be a willing candidate, a good candidate, and that's where people like Pierre shine, and Marilyn Gladue would shine. There are others, they would have to brush up on that, because sooner or later you have to debate in both official languages, and you don't want a leader to be crucified in Quebec. You just don't. We need them. We've shown that we can win in Quebec, but you've got to have at least passable French in order to convince them. And Stephen Harper certainly managed to do that. So it's not a lost cause by any stretch. I think there could be a pretty full field, and it's going to be pretty exciting. I think it's got to be done sooner than later, though, just because of the situation with the minority parliament. And I think Trudeau is bound to do just about anything. I mean, the latest polls show that he's neck and neck with the NDP, so they could trigger things. They've got a balance of power now. They could decide, hey, this is a perfect time. It might be our only opportunity, so we better be ready.
Yeah, and I mean, even once a new leader is in, I mean, it takes a little time for whoever that may be to establish themselves, to set up a shadow cabinet, hopefully get some profile, even, get some time in Parliament. I mean, it's difficult in a minority situation when you don't know when it happens. So you just can't afford to take your time. I'm going to ask while I got you here, and I mean, plans are fluid. Are you considering, jumping back into the political circle again?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to have one caucus meeting after the election loss. And I told caucus at the time, I'm eager to take that seat back from the NDP. I think that it was a situation where a lot of things, it was the perfect storm against us. And I think that it's very winnable. And I think the leadership race will inject a lot of excitement into things. And I mean, in 2019, I won by 26 percentage points. So the Conservatives are there. We just have to find them. And I think this race will inject a lot of excitement into Conservatives in this province, and it's conceivable that we could win the whole province, just like they win every seat in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking forward to that, and I'd like to see you back in there. Having that NDP thorn in there is just hurts as an Albertan, but that's how democracy goes. And leadership races, I mean, they can be a fantastic opportunity, or for party building, for getting excitement, fundraising. If it's done right, if it's not divisive, if it's not too personal, it can actually be a very good exercise in preparing that party. Because I think people have got to be getting tired of the Trudeau Liberals. They just need the right leader they can embrace, and they will go with the Conservatives.
Well, what's really interesting is you look at the U.S. right now, what's happening with Joe Biden, and he's roundly unpopular within 1 year, and people are fed up with him. And the midterms, they're going to kick butt. And yet we've put up with Justin Trudeau, the same kind of leader, since 2015, a leader who's out of touch with Canadians, who's nobody. I mean, the vast majority of people in Canada don't like him. So it's a wide open opportunity. It's just that we've got to get better as Conservatives. We've got to get the message out there. We've got to be true to our roots. We've got to be true and just campaign as Conservatives, not some kind of mixed bag messaging where people don't know where we're coming from. It's got to be a straight message of true Conservatives. I think most people, here's an example I use. If you were to have a random poll of Canadians and say, you've got two choices for prime minister, and only two choices: David Suzuki or Don Cherry. Where do you think they'd vote?
Oh yeah, the support exists out there, especially.
It's a rhetorical question. I think Don Cherry, for all his grumpiness and his bad media publicity, would outduel David Suzuki in the mind of the public. And so that, I mean, I think Canadians, they're not naturally liberals. I think they're naturally small C conservatives with all those values that conservatives value: family, religion, private property rights, and balanced budgets. We just have to find those people and reignite their passion.
Yeah, no, I think we can win without apologizing for being conservative. We just have to learn how to package it, and maybe we're going to have that opportunity soon. So it's good to hear you're still pounding the pavement there, because it's still going to be a battleground in Edmonton when the opportunity comes up again. And it's important to make sure we have a good, solid candidate who's going to take that seat back. So it's good to hear. And I really appreciate your joining us today, just to give an update as this develops. I mean, as I said, a crazy news time, and trying to keep up with everything that's going on at once. So thank you again. And where can we keep up with what you're doing right now?
You can find me on Facebook. You can find me at Kerry Diotte on Instagram. You can find me at kerrydiotte.com. I'm out there, and I'd love to come back and talk some more. Let's hope that we have a really robust leadership, and buy memberships and get involved, and let's get rid of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals.
Great, thanks. And yes, you said it for me. I hope you can come on again and talk to us all again soon. All right, have a good day, Kerry, and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Cory.
Great. So yes, for political weenies like me, we've got a leadership race coming, and I love those things. I know that they can be challenging and stuff like that. But as I was saying with Kerry, and as Kerry saying, these could be very productive, important exercises. And we should look, I guess, critically at ourselves, or conservatives who are there. I don't have a membership any longer, but I cheer for teams, and see what went wrong last time, reevaluate it, and make your decision going forward. As Kerry said, these are winnable. It's been done before. Quebec has had large tracts of it go conservative before. Alberta can go NDP free. We can do this. We can take that seat back in Edmonton, and we'll watch as it goes. A lot of people, again, Pierre is the name that just keeps coming up. We'll see. He hasn't said himself, if he's going to go for it, but he's certainly already the favorite before coming out of the gate. So that's going to develop as it goes. Now, tomorrow I'm going to have Renaud Brassard from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation in Quebec, and there are conservatives out there. There really are. And he's going to talk to me about how the vax tax, they backed off on it. Things again, pressure, bad ideas, they will go away. And that has happened. The Premier of Quebec is not going to follow through on that tax. I call it a fine on unvaccinated people. And we're going to have Western Standard columnist David Makachuk back on. He talks on international issues and some other things. I know he stirred up our comment scroll on Facebook with his last column, but that's okay. We don't always have to agree. I like getting folks on so we can get all stirred up and talking about those sorts of things. So again, that reminder, we are an independent outlet. Before I get on to that video I want to play, which is great, we're an independent outlet. We rely on you guys. This is how we bypass the mainstream media. Come on in there, westernstandardonline.com/membership. Take out a membership. It's $10 a month. Best $10 you'll spend. Honest, I'm not just blowing smoke here. And plus, you got a 2-week trial. If I'm full of it, you don't think it was worth $10 a month after 2 weeks, don't keep it going. But well over 90% of the people who try the trial stay on. It's less than a newspaper subscription used to cost. You get all of that content from Dave and Mel and me and Makachuk and so many other columnists and news writers. We've got Amber up in Edmonton. She's doing great. So check it out. Get on there. Subscribe to us on all those other social media channels. Share it to everybody else. Now, on a nice patriotic bent, even though I am, something of an Alberta independence-leaning person, all the same, I'm not ashamed of Canada. I just want to change the system of it, and I think independence would be the way to go there. I'm going to play a video of the national anthem with a number of images it's from, by the way, Meme the Left. I got to give credit where it's due. Meme the Left on YouTube. They put it together, and people take it where it is, tongue-in-cheek. There's some trucks moving around, and there's the Prime Minister moving around. It's not one of those threatening things. It's just fun. It's the anthem. Watch that video, and we'll have our close, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning at 11:30 a.m.